Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Russell, it's 6:30. We can get going whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right, so I am going to call this Land Use Committee meeting to order, and I'm going to turn it over to the Elections Committee and its chair, Chuck Warren, to ask questions of the candidates.
Thank you, Russell. In accordance with the bylaws, this meeting is devoted to asking questions of the candidates, and our committee has received questions, and we've met and decided which questions we're going to be asking. And so the first office is chair, and we have one candidate, Russell Squire. So Russell, I think first question I want to ask you, how would you describe your management style?
So, in terms of the board, I think it's fairly collaborative, in terms of how the committees are run and the way that the committees operate. I really like to let them do their own thing as much as possible and trust the committee chairs to run their meetings and set their agendas and conduct the business of the committee as much as possible as they see fit. Although, of course, part of the role of the chair is to step in when necessary and deal with intercommittee issues that may arise or other kinds of things that need to be addressed. The other thing I like to do is I like to get input from people before making a decision. So, I'll sometimes ask people for advice, or I'll confer with a particular committee or confer with officers or others about various different things that are going on. And, that's and then in terms of running the meetings, that's a whole other discussion. But basically there, my goal is to provide a balance of giving people the opportunity to be heard and to have a good discussion and a fair discussion where we can hear both sides of an issue and get the viewpoints out. But at the same time, wanting to make sure that we're keeping the meeting moving forward and keeping things running and keeping things on track and getting things done in a timely manner.
Thank you. What do you see as the major challenge facing the community board at this point right now?
So I think the major challenge that we are dealing with is how to ensure that the community and the board that represents the community is actually going to be heard and is actually going to be listened to in what we do. And this is not a new problem. It's a constant issue. Ultimately, we all know that we are advisory. And so that means that our decisions and our resolutions that we pass don't have binding force, but we hope that they are going to be taken into account by elected officials, by the government. And so I think particularly when it comes to land use issues, and I think we are going to have some big land use items coming up in the coming year, particularly in the wake of what happened with the blood center, ensuring that our voice actually is going to be heard and ensuring that we are going to be listened to on these issues, I think is going to continue to be critical. I think we've actually had a lot of success with that, notwithstanding what happened with the blood center, but more broadly, I do think we've been able to do that. And I think ultimately the way that we're able to have influence, because we're only advisory, it really comes down to our persuasiveness and our advocacy. The board really needs to have credibility. And, that's a big part of getting people in government to listen to us and to take our words into account. And we also have to be persuasive in what we're presenting. I think, making sure that our resolutions are going to be compelling for people, that we're getting the facts out there, that we're making good arguments. All of those are things that really go into making sure that when we take a position on something, that we're going to be able to actually be heard, and hopefully our recommendations will be followed.
Thank you. Do you think the current community board committees cover the needs of the community? Would you remove, add, or change the existing committees?
So I certainly think we have everything covered with the committees that we have. We have a lot of committees, so I don't think we need more committees. I am open to the idea of potentially combining committees or looking into ways to cut down on the number of committees. But ultimately, I think most of our committees are pretty active, and we actually do have committee meetings most nights of the week. And so while that poses challenges at times, if people are trying to schedule things, at the same time, I think it really reflects the dedication of the members of our board and the commitment of our board and really the excellence of our board in really doing a lot of hard work and really delving into a number of issues that are important to the community. And the fact is, there are a lot of things that we're dealing with. And I think it's good to have various different specialized committees able to tackle these things and able to address them instead of trying to cram them all into a handful of committees. So ultimately, I don't think we need more committees. I'm open to the idea of consolidating, but don't really have specific thoughts in that regard.
Okay, thank you. What steps can be taken to shorten our board meetings or to have more time in those meetings for discussions of our resolutions? This was a question that a lot of people really wanted to ask.
Sure. Well, look, unfortunately, I think those two things are somewhat at odds, obviously. More discussion means longer meetings. This is a constant issue, and I think it's a situation where basically one has to strike a balance between, on the one hand, giving people the opportunity to have their say and having a robust discussion and making sure that we are hearing from all sides and giving full consideration to an issue, because these are weighty issues that we're dealing with and people do have strong views about them. And there are various different views in the community that I think we want to represent. And of course, on the other hand, keeping things on the rails, keeping things moving forward, not keeping everybody here. All of us are volunteers. And of course, the public, comes to listen to our meetings, not keeping people up to all hours of the night. So the fact of the matter is there's, I think, no easy way to do that. It's really a question of striking a balance and trying to balance those issues. I think in terms of how to go about it, well, one thing I will say is, I think unfortunately, there is not a lot that we can do structurally at this point to the meeting. So for example, one thing that sometimes takes up a lot of time is the public session. And that's something that we're always going to have. At this point, we only give members of the public 2 minutes to speak. I don't think we can really cut that down further. As folks know, I have tried to make the public session as efficient as possible when we do have a lot of people speaking on a particular subject by doing a virtual raising of the hands, the kind of thing that we would do if people were in person. And, basically showing where you stand on an issue without necessarily having to have everybody speak for 2 minutes. I actually think we have implemented that pretty successfully in some of the past meetings. And we have seen where a lot of people are signed up to speak that they haven't really taken all of their time or they've yielded to other people. So that's one thing we can do. But, we're always going to have the public session where people are speaking for 2 minutes. We're always going to have the reports from the elected officials' offices. And again, those folks, we only give them 2 minutes. There's just not a lot of space that we can get from that. The chair report and the district manager's reports don't tend to be too long. So I think structurally there's not much we can do. So it really is just a question of how the meetings are being managed and going about it. I do think sticking to Robert's rules as much as possible is useful in that regard. And, I know that there's been some, at times we have bended the rules a little bit when it comes to calling the question and not necessarily going to a calling of the question right when it's first called, even though technically that might be what the rules require, because, if it's a contested issue, we want to give people a chance to hear from all sides. But for the most part, I think if we stick to Robert's rules, I think that's going to help things and of course move things along. And then the other thing is, constantly reminding people that the best thing they can do is try to be concise in the points they're making. But this is, it's a constant challenge. And, sometimes when you try to move the meeting along, you have people who are complaining that, they're upset or they're angry that debate has been cut off. And so it's just a balance. And on any given discussion, you can't necessarily please everybody. But I actually do think the last meeting that we had, the one in October, the October full board meeting, was a good example of, a meeting where we had a pretty meaty agenda and we were actually able to move things forward. So it's an area where I'm certainly cognizant of everybody's concerns in that regard, but I think things have improved over the course of the time that we've been on Zoom. And I think things are trending in the right direction. And, at the end of the day, the other thing that I will say is it's also up to all of us as board members. There are things that the chair can do, but also we all have to be respectful of one another's time and, keep that in mind in how we're all conducting ourselves.
Thank you. What are your views about cooperating with other community boards outside of our district?
I think it's a very useful and important thing to do. And it's something that I look forward to doing more of. Just to go back to the example of the blood center, what we found very clearly in that situation was that issues that affect our community board are not going to be decided entirely by people who represent us. And, we found ourselves essentially lobbying the whole city council, people from all 5 boroughs, and making that effort. And I was very grateful. I reached out on behalf of our board to the chairs of the other Manhattan community boards in an effort to try and enlist their support for something that was, I felt, and what we've all said, was a potentially dangerous precedent in terms of overriding a local community board when it comes to a zoning issue, and in particular, R8B zoning, which the community had fought very hard for and really wanted to preserve. And I was very gratified that there were a number of my fellow board chairs around the borough who were willing to extend themselves and who did help and helped us get some meetings with people. And ultimately, it, didn't change the result, but it certainly made me cognizant of the need to work together. And it's something that we've done on the borough board and something that we're increasingly doing. And there's actually quite a bit of sharing of resolutions that goes on between community boards and community board chairs. And I think that's something that's increasing, where all of us can get the benefit of positive things that one or another board has done. So I'm very in favor of it. And it's something that I have done and want to continue to do.
Thank you. What more can be done, do you think, to ensure that our board and its role comes to the attention of more people in our community district? This has been a continuing problem, obviously.
So, I think we have to certainly continue the kind of outreach that we are doing. I will say the art shows that we've been doing recently, I think, have been a great thing for getting our name out there and getting us out in a positive way in front of people. And a lot of credit, of course, for that really goes to the Arts Committee, who were the real chief organizers of that effort, along with the staff. So I thank them for that. But I've really tried as much as possible to help them in the work that they're doing. And I think part of among the benefits that we've gotten from that is getting the word out to the community about who we are and what we do. I think the tabling that we do at various events is very important. I would like for us, I think there are things that we can do more. I think, unfortunately, with the pandemic, it has been a little bit difficult to do the kinds of outreach that we might have done. But for example, speaking to students, I actually gave a presentation at one of the local high schools in the district, talking about the community board, explaining to high school seniors what the board is, what it does, and getting people interested in it. And so I think that kind of thing is something that we want to continue to do more of. It's something that I plan to continue to do, and just essentially outreach wherever and however we can do it, I think is going to be the way to go.
Okay. Thank you. When taking an action, how would you balance, how should community board members balance the views that are expressed by those who have shown up to a particular meeting with the views that an individual board member may have, or other board members may have?
I think it is a balance. I would say fundamentally, first and foremost, every one of us is appointed to this board to use our individual best judgment in making our decisions and in voting. And essentially, how you fundamentally, when it comes down to it, how you particularly, the conclusion that you come to, what you think is right, what you think is the right thing to do, I think is essentially what you should do and how you should vote. I think that that's the bottom line. But I think that people should take into consideration very seriously what the community has to say. And I think we tend to get very thoughtful comments from the public. And I think very often they're very persuasive comments. And I do think it's very important for us to respect the views of the community, to keep those views in mind, and to really give them the consideration that they are due in making up our minds. And similarly, if other community board members are making an argument, we owe each other the respect of listening and hearing people out and hearing what people have to say, and really considering those points that people are making. And ultimately, I think the more you actually consider those views, you're going to come to a better decision, and your decision will have been better considered, even if ultimately you don't agree with what someone may have said. So I think it's important to give that all of its consideration and really keep all of that in mind and take the job of coming to a decision very seriously. But at the end of the day, we are not here to you have to make your own decision, I think, as an individual on what you think is right. And I think that's what your vote has to reflect. If it was just going to be a matter of, polling the room or polling how many people show up on one side or another, or frankly, we wouldn't need community board members to do that. So each of us is appointed to use our judgment at the end of the day. And that, I think, is ultimately how you should vote.
Thank you. So what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think people would want to know before casting their votes? Either something relevant to your performance in your position, or about your personality in general, or a personal experience?
Sure. Well, I'm very proud of the work that the board has done during my tenure and the work that I've done leading the board during that time. I think we have had a number of great successes, and these are not things that I did single-handedly by any means. It's in many cases a lot of efforts by various different committees, efforts by the full board. But to take a few examples, of course, the recent redistricting fight, that's a situation where we got essentially everything that we asked for. And I think we didn't know that was going to be the case. And it was certainly not a guarantee that they were going to change the draft maps to the extent that they did. And that was certainly a team effort with the Voting Reform Task Force and a number of community groups. But also something that I was very involved in. And I think a very good example of how our board can be effective, because the resolutions that we passed on that were very comprehensive and I think very persuasive. And I think, laying out the argument as thoroughly as we did, I think really helped in providing alternatives very specifically to the board, to the districting commission rather, that they could adopt. I think really helped. I think the outreach that we did to other boards, and I coordinated closely with community boards in Queens to help add their voice to that, I think really helped quite a bit. And ultimately, all of the organizing that so many people in our community did to get people out to actually express the view, I think really helped. So I'm proud of the effectiveness that I think we've been able to have on a number of issues. I would say, in general, my tenure and the way that I've approached things has been, well, fundamentally, in running the meetings, the job of the chair is to be fair and to run the meetings fairly, and not to privilege one side over the other. That's something that I take very seriously. That's something that I have really worked very hard to do, and that I think I have done. I'm proud of my record in that regard. And, of course, the chair has to respect the decisions of the board and, run with what the board has decided to do, notwithstanding that the chair may have a different individual view on a particular resolution or particular issue. And again, that's something where I really think my record holds up very well. So ultimately, my goal and my role in leading the board is to allow all the members of the board and to allow the leaders of the committee to do the best possible job that they can, and to lead the board in the right direction, but also to facilitate the excellent work that everybody on this board is capable of doing and that all the committees are capable of doing. And again, that's something where I think I have been very effective at doing that and really, helping committees do their best work.
Thank you, Russell. That concludes the questions we have for you as the chair candidate. And just to remind everyone that we have passed out, Will sent out, I believe, to everyone attendance sheets for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So board members can take a look at everyone's attendance who's running for office, to the extent you're interested in that. And we will be voting next week, just a week from now, and there'll be some short speeches by candidates and then the vote. So
Thank you.
So I think let's proceed now to the candidates for first vice chair. And I think everyone may have gotten this, but Billy Freeland, who had been a candidate, has withdrawn as a candidate. And so we have two candidates for the position of first vice chair, Valerie Mason and Abraham Salcido. And I think we'll go in the order that we have them listed here, and the next up to answer some questions is Valerie, and I see Valerie. Hi, can we unmute Valerie?
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Oh, good, there you are. Okay, Valerie, so why did you decide to run for this position? Can you tell us that?
Well, I've been the second vice chair. Some people have thought I was the first vice chair this year, but no, I have been the second vice chair. You don't, according to the bylaws, you do not automatically move into that position. So I have been serving as the second vice chair. Looking at the bylaws, I mean, why did I decide to do it? Because I wanted to be in a more administrative role in terms of the community board than just serving as a committee chair or a member of the board. I actually have enjoyed my work as the second vice chair, and even though I haven't been the first vice chair, I mean, I think Russell and I and the rest of the team have been working very well to do the behind the scenes work, if you will, relating to the running of the board and making sure the board runs smoothly or as smoothly as it can, interfacing with the community at large. And I've really enjoyed that. And I've enjoyed that aspect of it. Part of it, I think, is because I do serve in an executive or leadership role in several other organizations while I'm on this board. And I'm very familiar with how that works. And I enjoy that piece of civic activity. So I enjoy the activism, but I also enjoy the administration. And I think that we are sort of an embarrassment of riches in Community Board 8 with all the talent that we have on our board, as well as the enthusiasm and the having such an active community. I mean, you know, I've been at a lot of, I've gone around actually attending other community board meetings of other community boards to see what their attendance and their participation is like. And we are extremely lucky that we have such an active community in our meetings. And so I also enjoy that part of it as well.
Good, thank you. Could you elaborate, you referred to this, on your administrative or managerial experience, either on the board or with other organizations that would help you do a better job as the first vice chair?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm the past president of an organization called the Women's Prison Association and Home that works with women who are incarcerated and their families, as well as when they leave. I was the president of that organization for 3 years, and I've served on the board as well as on the audit committee, and I chair the development committee for that organization. I was a founding member and continue to be the president of the East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association. We represent over 4,000 residents on the Upper East Side, more than 20 buildings. So I run that organization and I administer that as well, along with a great team of volunteers. I just recently came off as one of the trustees of my church. So I've done a lot of that and fundraising. I do a lot of fundraising for my son's school in addition to that. And I'm trying to think what I do in my spare time. And I just enjoy, I enjoy the activism and the skill work, and everything that I do involves delegation, execution, and knowing when there are things that I should be doing and when there are things that other people should be doing. So I don't want to do everything myself. And Oh, I should also add that I'm part of Sharon Pope Marshall's Land Use Coalition, which is an excellent group as well. And I'm not an administrator in that, just a happy attendee.
Thank you. So how would you describe your management style?
My management style is again, it's delegation and knowing. I like to delegate. I like to get people involved because I think the more people have things to do, the more they feel connected to the organization. I think it's really important to find out what people's strengths are and allow those to play into the organization. Everybody has different talents, and it's I think the job of, you know, a chair or a first vice chair to recognize what those talents are and try to put them to the best use. So I think I'm really good at identifying those talents of other people and letting them run with what they're doing. I think, to echo a little bit of what Russell said, the committees work very well. Everybody who's a chair is running their committees, and, you know, that's a talent in and of itself. So I think that's what I see my managerial style. It's definitely not keeping everything on my desk. I couldn't do everything that I do, including my full-time job, if that's the way I work. So that's my style.
Thanks. Thank you. What do you see as the major challenge that faces us as a community board at this time?
I think the major challenge we have is being heard, not being heard because people are hearing us. It's whether they're actually listening to us. And I think that is the challenge that we have. And I think, you know, Russell touched on this. I've been doing it as well in terms of connecting up with other community boards and making connections. You know, I think one of the most frustrating things of coming to our meetings, the frustration that I hear in people's voices, that they think they're coming to the community board and that's the last stop, and that, you know, we make the decisions and this is the place where it all happens. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We're purely advisory. And I think some of the lessons that we've learned from, whether it's what happened with the Longfellow Tower or even in the redistricting, we have to really be good at setting up coalitions. And I think the more we can identify similarities and issues where we can get together with other community boards and band together, we can have more influence and we can change things. And we can have people have more confidence that when they come to the community board, not only is this a place to vent, but it is a place where we can make a difference. And I think we have been doing that. We've been doing more of it, and we've been doing it more effectively. And I think in terms of being a first vice chair, I can be helpful to the chair and the rest of the community board in putting those alliances together.
Thank you. What about the current community board committees? Do you think they cover the needs of the community? And would you change things, reduce the committee structure?
Well, first of all,
existing committees.
Yeah, first of all, that's not really the job of the first vice chair.
No, but just your thoughts. Just your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think that I think we have a lot of committees. We have a lot of diverse interests. It's a really good question. We have a lot going on. I think it might be something that, in addition to talking to people on the committee, it might be time. We have a really good distribution list to put something out there to the community at large, to try to see if there's something out there that we're missing. I mean, we're kind of in a little bit in our own little echo chamber of what the community board and the members of the community board find interesting, but it also might be interesting to do some kind of survey to see how we can get other people involved. And what is important to them.
Okay, thanks. What kind of steps do you think we could take to shorten our meetings or so leave us more time for discussions of our resolutions and stuff? Again, that's just, your point of view on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough, well, okay. That's the toughest part of this because again, we have great discussions and in our smaller committees, people come up with really great ideas. I think it's very interesting that we're having this election committee night discussion tonight on our quote unquote, land use meeting. And I think that maybe we can try to take topics that we know are going to spur a lot of discussion and that we want to encourage community participation and maybe have more special meetings around those topics so that we can ensure a full discussion of whatever it is. I mean, we did that a couple of times in the context of, not bike lanes, but the location of the city bike stations. We had a whole bunch of meetings that were particularly focused on that. And that might be a way to do it. I mean, some of you already know this. I find it very irritating that city agencies come to us and make presentations the night of our meetings without giving us a pre-presentation. I think that slows down our meetings and it doesn't make for an efficient discussion. And I would really like to see how we can do better with that, because I just think if you have more information and prior to a meeting, you can get some questions answered, it would cut down on some of the fact finding and get more to the actual discussions. I know we've had some pushback from some city agencies regarding that, but I think that would be really helpful. Other than that, I mean, maybe we can, and just another idea I had, I know that I sent an email to Chuck and Craig about this, is in order to get participation and reduce maybe frustration with the general public, is try to publish our agendas with perhaps estimated times of when we will get to the items on those agendas. Just so that people look, with always a disclaimer that we're not saying that that's the exact time something's going to start, but at least, people won't feel like they're waiting hours to get into a topic. So that I think would be another idea. It may not shorten the meeting, but it may make for more happy participants.
Okay, thank you. What are your views about cooperating with other community boards outside our district?
I think it's great. I've been doing it. I just, with Alita and a couple of others, reaching out to Community Board 11 and 6 regarding congestion pricing and what their boards have been doing about different things. When we were working on the redistricting, we were working with Community Board 6. I think it's really important. And again, I would like to see us doing more of it. I mean, more cross cooperation in terms of maybe sponsoring joint meetings with other community boards on issues that we know are actually affecting those communities as well.
Thank you. And what more do you think can be done to ensure that the board and our role comes to the attention of more people in our community district? How can we?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think we have a lot of cooperatives and condos on Community Board 8. I think we should be getting out there and making sure managing agents know about us and our meetings, pointing up different, whatever the topic is. And we should be out there promoting ourselves. Maybe we should be reaching out more to the local, whether it's the Patch or eastside.com or whatever, to publicize, Lindsay's shaking her head no, publicize what we're doing prior to, so that we can get more participation, because people are reading these publications, and this way they will know that our meetings are coming up and we can pique some interest, because not everybody knows about Community Board 8. I mean, look, I've told this story before. Before I was involved in our action to be against the MTA to prevent a mid-block entrance on 72nd Street. I never knew about Community Board 8, and I had grown up in New York City. And nobody had ever told me that there was a community board and what it was doing. So I think we definitely should be in the schools. And I think it's great that we have, many junior members on our board who not junior, but younger, who are involved in school and can get the message out that there is a community board, because I think that's great. But I also think that trying different avenues to get people involved and understand, what we do. I mean, I was at like a luncheonette talking about streetlights with somebody who happened to be, I met for the first time, who came from Community Board 1. And in the middle of our conversation, somebody walked over to us and said, "How do I get a streetlight on our corner? Can I come to your meeting?" And it turned out that, the woman lived on the west side. So we said, Community Board 7 is your place to go. But I mean, that's the thing. People really don't know where to go. And so I think we need to brainstorm about how to get us out there. I mean, because I will never forget when I went to a town hall with our former mayor. And when I asked him, I said to him, our community board supports a 210-foot height limit. Will you help us work with city planning to get it? And his response was, "Well, you seem very heartfelt, but if I listen to you, I'd have to listen to the 58 other community boards in New York City." And I said, "Well, that's what they're there for." And he didn't really seem to understand the concept. So I think that's another thing we have to do. We have to re-engage with the mayor's office and get the word out there that we are out there, and people, we are the clearinghouse, and more elected officials should know that and want to be a part of us. And once we start making those connections, people will start wanting to participate in the community board. Sorry for such a long answer.
Thank you. Have you participated in community outreach efforts that seek to elevate the profile of our board, such as street fairs and things like that?
Yeah, I have. And it's really great. If you haven't done it, you should really do it. You meet some really, really interesting and fun and, again, engaging people who have great ideas.
Okay. Again, when taking an action, how should a board member balance views expressed by those who show up at a meeting and their own views and the views of other board members?
It's a really tough job. I think, again, we need to be cognizant. A lot of times people come to our meetings who aren't from our neighborhood. And we need to make sure that when we're listening to opinions, et cetera, that we are listening closely to see if we are hearing from the community and getting a balanced view. But at the end of the day, especially on very local issues, I think it's really important that we listen to the members of our community. I mean, we can have our own viewpoint about certain things, but we need to listen to the people who live in our community. That's what we're here for.
Okay, thank you. Do you feel comfortable expressing an opinion at a meeting that you believe goes against the views of the majority of the board?
I think you all know that. I mean, when I express my opinion, that's my opinion, but I stand behind what we do as a board. I mean, that's, if you're a first vice chair or a chair, that's the compromise you're making, if you will, that the opinions that you're going to be out there expressing are not always your individual opinion, but the opinion of the board. And the time for you to express your opinion is in the meetings. And if Russell, or if Russell's not available, I'm just saying now, because I am the go-to person if Russell isn't available. If a resolution has been passed by this board, and that's the position of this board, that's the position that we take publicly.
Thank you. And last question is, again, what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think people would like to know before casting their vote? Either something relevant to your performance,
I
your
don't know.
position, or about your personality in general, or a personal experience.
I just want to say, in the time I've been on the board, it's been such a really great experience for me. I have really learned so much from everybody on this board. I mean, I'm looking at this gallery of people, and each one of you, I can think of something that I've learned from you that I didn't know before. And it's been, I mean this sincerely, it's been an absolute privilege to get to know all of you. Again, to learn so much from you about so many different issues. And, even some of our newest members, like Bill Angelos, I mean, I got to know him working on the Longfellow Tower. And it's made me a better community activist, made me a better board member. And, that's what I just want to say about me. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I don't think that whatever happens to this city, I will ever leave it. I went to school here. Public school. I love this place. I want to do everything I can to make it, to continue to be the place that I want to be. And I just appreciate everyone's volunteer efforts, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, our next candidate for first vice chair is Abraham Salcido. Is Abraham here? Can we unmute him?
Yes. Hi,
Oh,
Chuck.
Hi, Abraham. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good. Okay, so why did you decide to run for this position, first vice chair?
Yeah. So I'm closing in on 10 years on this board, which has been a very enjoyable time. I've learned so much. I chair one of the busiest committees in street life. I previously also co-chaired the environmental committee several years back. And, I think we've seen a lot of change on this board, especially with COVID and going remote, that, I want to be more involved and take an active role. I think there's more that I can offer. And I think that we're in a place of, where we might transition back maybe next year into in person. And I think the experiences and challenges we've had during kind of COVID and working remotely, that, I can bring something to the table to help at a different level than just at the committee level.
Thank you. So can you elaborate on your administrative or managerial experience, either on the board or with other organizations, that would help you do a better job in the position you're running for?
Yeah, firstly with the board, again, Street Life is one of the busiest committees in terms of the applications, number of queries, and kind of participation from the public behind the scenes. So I think that experience has, given me good insight as to kind of how the board works. I can imagine the number of requests and types of queries that the board office gets. So I have a glimpse of that. So that wouldn't be surprising, and it wouldn't be something that would be, kind of challenging. At a managerial level, in my current role, I oversee, a group of attorneys. And I think for me, the managerial style is to, keep the big picture in mind. And making sure that someone is assigned to tackle the issues, to be responsive, and I think that's the key thing. Because I think in terms of responsiveness, people want to be heard and have their expectations managed. So I think those are the types of things that I think I can bring to the table and be helpful for this position.
Thanks. You answered the next question about your managerial style, yeah, and then answers.
I kind of merged them. Sorry about that.
Right. That's okay. No, that's fine. What do you see as the major challenge facing us as a community board at this time?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. And I think, the first one has been discussed by by Russell and by Valerie. One is in terms of being heard. So I think, we can, in our role as community board, we're advisory, and we can take our resolutions, but I think really the key is follow through. I think we showed, again with the redistricting, that when we follow through and push on what we want, we can get a lot done. And if we don't, we can be overlooked. So again, I think we need to make sure that we're always following through to make sure that, our desires as best as possible are being acted upon. And again, that comes with leveraging the relationships we have with our elected officials. Again, as was said before, kind of building coalitions, knowing, we can't do it alone, but as a unified group, if there's unified interest on topics, then, making sure that we leverage those so that we are not just heard, but actually listened to and actioned based on what we recommend. And then the second one that I wanted to mention is, I think I'm going to use the word perception, because I think that Zoom has provided a forum where we have some more participation from the public because it's more accessible than we might have had in the meetings. But I think we need to do a better job of kind of explaining to people how we operate and and who we are and what our capabilities are, from explaining that we're advisory, how things work, what the process is, because I think sometimes members of the public might come to a meeting for the first time and not know how things work, and come with a different expectation and leave disappointed based on that expectation. So I think while it might be repetitive in some cases, I think we almost at every meeting, or just do a better job of continually letting the public know what our parameters are and what we can do, so that there's no misunderstanding, and so that we're not viewed as being ineffective because someone didn't properly understand kind of our role and how we do it.
Thank you. Do you think that the current board committees cover the needs of the community? Should we change them, remove committees, add committees, or change anyone? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think our committees cover a broad swath of all of our needs, which is great. And I think as a whole, committees should be almost like a living. There's not a document, but just kind of it should be fluid depending on the needs are at the time. So sometimes the committee might be more active at certain points than others. So then maybe in those situations, maybe there could be not consolidation, but just where it's appropriate. Maybe there might be joint meetings to tackle things in a more succinct way, and have the opportunity for combination of meetings to provide kind of that succinctness.
And what steps do you think we can take to shorten our meetings so we can have more time, for discussions of our resolutions and things?
Yeah. Again, that's the standing question. That's kind of the inherent challenge that we face, because everyone should be heard. So we want to balance that, and there should be time for discussion. But I think part of it is, and again, this is another thing that should be kind of reiterated and clarified for the public, is a lot of the nitty gritty work is done at the committee level, and I think that's something that needs to be kind of appreciated when we're talking about really meaty topics. And while not everyone can attend those committee meetings and discussion is great, I think there should be some reverence for kind of the work that's done at the committee level. So I think that's one thing that can help maybe tailor discussion. Secondly, I know what we've done in the past is, for example, use this land use meeting to shift committee meetings. So I know my street life committee has been moved for discussion into the land use meeting when we know that there's going to be bigger agendas at the full board. So I think that's something that can continue to be leveraged, maybe more so. Maybe we even have the elected officials reports being moved to land use. So just I think play with that to kind of see what can help reduce the time. And then again, I really did like the idea of having standalone meetings if there's going to be a really big ULURP topic or something like that, where it's going to warrant its own session.
Thank you. What are your views about cooperating with other boards outside of our district on issues? Yeah,
I think it serves many purposes. I think one, just relationship wise, I think it's good to kind of just know our neighbors and kind of what's happening there, because maybe they might have some insights or different viewpoints as to how to tackle things or see things that might be coming up. Again, we mentioned in terms of kind of coalition and being able to have a louder voice if we have more support, especially when we have aligned interest. And then also just from the practicality, like having those relationships For example, with when we were doing kind of the new election framework, I know that a lot, the board looked at other committees, other community boards to see what their process was like. I think we can always learn by being able to take a further field view than just confined to our community board.
What more do you think we can do to ensure that our board and what we do comes to the attention of more people in our community district, which has been an ongoing issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the email blasts that we do are great, but I think we do need to do more outreach, whether it's one, kind of leveraging our elected officials to kind of plug us so that we're people hear about community boards, and I know they do so already, but I think that could be done a little more. Secondly, I think it's partnering with whether it's our local schools and our neighborhood associations, so that we can really be a presence, whether it's giving a presentation again about what we do and how we operate in our remit. I think the more we can reinforce and clarify to people who we are, but then also how we are, I think will go a long way to increase participation and satisfaction, because people will know at least again our parameters.
Have you participated in community outreach efforts that seek to elevate the profile of the board, such as street fairs and other kinds of things like that?
Yeah, street fairs is one of the funnest days. It's been a little while, but it was definitely those summer days at the tables, just talking to people, and I think and I was always surprised that how people, again, speaking about the need for outreach, how so many people don't really know about community boards. So it's always a pleasure kind of meeting people there. But then also, I actually make it a point to tell almost as many people as I can, when I'm talking to friends or neighbors or even new acquaintances, I try to find a way to plug community boards and let them know kind of what we do. And, if someone's complaining about something, I'm like, did you know? Just because the more just community board is voiced, I think, then the better for us.
Thanks. When you're taking action, how would you balance the views expressed by people who show up at our meetings with your own views and then the views of other board members?
Yeah. Again, the way I approach things, I always try to listen first and take everyone's perspective into consideration. And I think it's also important to consider that, while members of the public might come to sessions, that's still just a percentage of the entire community. It's, again, because there might be people that either don't know about it or just aren't able to attend. So I think those views are also should be considered as well. But at the end of the day, we're each tasked with assessing it from our particular viewpoint based on our experience, our whether it's professional, personal. That's why we were appointed, to bring that perspective. So at the end of the day, it comes down to what we think is best for the community as a whole. And while deference should be given to the members of the public that show up, the ultimate decision is ours to determine what we think is best for the community as a whole.
Thank you. Do you feel comfortable expressing an opinion at a meeting that you believe goes against the majority of the board, or would be an unpopular view?
I do, and I have, and I think that's just as important, because we don't ever, and not that we would, because we have a very diverse board in terms of views and opinions, but it's important to hear the opposite side. It's important to hear a nay, because we don't want to potentially get caught up in just kind of going with the flow. It's important to question and to challenge constructively, of course, so that maybe that'll either reaffirm someone's position, or it might make them at least contemplate. So I think the opposite viewpoint should always be heard, because it can add value, whether or not it changes someone's viewpoint.
Okay, so again, the last question: what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think we would want to know before voting? Something about that's relevant to your performance and your perspective, position, or about your personality in general, or a personal experience that you think is relevant?
Yeah, I think what I can add to this role is, when I run my meetings at Street Light, I think it's important that everyone be heard. Everyone has, is taking their time to come to our meetings and has different viewpoints. So I think everyone should be heard. I also make it a point to express that, everyone's opinion should be respected, and we should operate with decorum. And I think that's a key thing that, we need to continue to reinforce again regularly at meetings, because sometimes we come across heated topics, but at the end of the day, we're all colleagues and we should be respectful. And that's how I try to run my meetings. And I think that's something that will be an overarching principle that I would try to continue to reinforce if selected to this role.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Abraham.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, then we're going, the next office is second vice chair, and we have two candidates. And the first candidate, Rebecca Dangora. And can we unmute Rebecca?
I'm unmuted.
Oh, thank you. There you are. So Rebecca, why did you decide to run for this position of second vice chair?
It's twofold. One, it's because I've loved my tenure on the board. Even though evenings have been filled with late night meetings, I really appreciate all the hard work we do. Second is I think throughout my tenure, I've demonstrated an ability to step up and do kind of all the behind the scenes stuff, which I think is a big part of the role of second vice chair. It's there to support, it's there to help lead, bring ideas to the table, but essentially it's to help with the managerial aspect of the board. I mentioned this when I ran for secretary last year. Within my first month as a board member, I already wrote minutes for 3 committees, of which I was neither chair nor an official member. And I think that's the biggest part of this role, is to help fill in the gaps and fill in the cracks. And that's something that I've always loved to do.
Can you elaborate on your style, your administrative or managerial experience, either on the board or what other organizations that you have?
Sure. So in my professional life, part of my responsibilities include managing our school's foundation board, so that you need to have an acute awareness of parliamentary procedure, be on top of all of the kind of administrative aspects of that role. And I think on the board, I have served as secretary for 3 years, which has included serving on the executive committee, where the board officers have bi-weekly or bi-monthly meetings where we kind of talk about all of the issues the board is currently facing and bring new ideas to the table about how to improve our processes. And I serve as co-chair of 3 committees on the board, and I've learned a lot through that experience.
Okay. How would you describe your management style?
I think it's also my managerial style is to be a listener. And that's not just a listener to all of our other board members, it's also to the public. So when we were dealing with the blood center, I foresaw that many members of the public were going to want to speak in the public session. And obviously it was a very serious topic that we as board members needed to address at the same time. So I thought that we should allow for the public to submit written testimony, so that even if we needed to cut people off, we wouldn't be limiting their ability to express their opinions and their views. And I think that's a very important part, especially that's very important to management style for a public agency and a board, where you have to come up with ways to ensure that everyone's voice is heard without not limiting our time, but still running a productive meeting. So it's thinking of the little things ahead of time and bringing them to the table.
What do you think is the major challenge that faces us as a community board at this point?
So while I agree with what everyone else has said, I want to raise a different concern, which is more administrative, which is we're going to be returning to in-person meetings soon, as was mentioned. That is going to be a huge feat. We probably are no longer going to be meeting at the Blood Center. We're going to need to find locations. I advocated to ensure we had technology to continue to live stream our meetings, even when we go back to being in person. I don't know if everyone remembers, and maybe the new board members don't know this. The only meetings that were recorded, all meetings were recorded. The only ones that were videotaped and posted online used to be our full board meetings. So not only do we have to find new spaces, we have to find spaces that have the technology we need to be able to continue ensuring accessibility to those members of the public who may not be able to go in person. And sure, we want to encourage them to be able to participate, but we also want to make sure they're able to see what we talked about and what we decided. And this is going to, I think our board office is going to need a lot of support in trying to figure out how we can return to in person and do it in a way that doesn't lose sight of all of the benefits we have gotten through conducting business on Zoom.
What do you think about our current community board committees? Do you think they cover what the community needs? Would you change it, add, subtract to the existing committees?
So as a board, compared to other boards in the city, we have a lot more committees, and I think it's great. I wouldn't schedule our meetings and which committees need monthly, a set date each month, because I think we've run into this problem several times. As a fellow co-chair of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, you remember it was almost impossible for us to get a meeting on the books when we had an issue that the board clearly articulated was something we had to address. So I think the only thing that needs to change is maybe we have to relook at how we schedule our committee meetings and find a better balance to ensure there's a little bit more room to deal with urgent issues.
Thank you. What steps do you think we can take to shorten our meetings so we can have more time for the discussion of our resolutions?
As everyone has said before me, it's very tricky because we can't limit public time, and I'm a big advocate for making sure the public's been heard. I've brought that up repeatedly. I think maybe allowing people to submit written testimony as well for if not every item, every controversial item would be a good procedural step. That also would allow them to say everything they want to say. I think there has been some frustration from members of the public that they get cut off very quickly. We don't have time for them to speak more than 2 minutes, but we do want to be able to hear their concerns. And I think that's one option. And the second is I think we all as a board maybe need to think about calling to question in a new way. When we were in person, we used to have, consistent reminders about making sure people have a chance to speak before the question's called. I think our meetings almost always end up longer when we prematurely call to question, and then there's kind of a fight a little bit afterwards. So I think looking at how we speak as board members and how we call to question would be a good way to smooth the process over.
Mm-hmm. What are your views about cooperating with other community boards that are outside our district on a regular basis?
It's essential. I've actually been working with I'm on the younger side of the community board members about creating a network throughout the Manhattan Community Board system for kind of people under the age of 35 to encourage them not only to run for leadership positions or to take an active role, but to have kind of a support system. So I've been working on that outside of this board. And I think as we saw with redistricting, we had an amazing joint meeting with the Queens Community Board. Our work can only be heard more clearly if we have more people screaming our name. I think there's also the Manhattan borough board, which Russell participates in, I think maybe it would be great to get some updates on what was discussed there. Because if we hear a little bit more about what other community boards are doing, we can think of ways to work together.
Thank you. What more do you think we can do to make sure our board and its role comes to the attention of more people in our community district, which is a continuing problem?
I think there are a couple things. As was said before, utilizing elected officials. I think if we know we're having a very controversial or important agenda item, maybe we should ask them to post the link to sign up for our meeting on social media. I think we also need to maybe reevaluate how we're flyering. I think maybe we can start leaving some flyers in local businesses as well, making sure we've had this issue actually on the transportation committee this month, where we were talking about taking parking spaces at specific sites. And I understand that we only got the locations very last minute, but I think it would have been helpful to post signs at those places, because if people are walking on the street and they see something that's directly affecting them, they're going to hear about it and they're going to tell the people immediately beside them that they have an opportunity to do something about it.
Okay, thank you. Have you participated in community outreach efforts that seek to evaluate the profile of the board, such as street fairs and other things?
Yes, actually, unfortunately, I have not been able to do as many street fairs during COVID for personal reasons, but I'll never forget, I think before my first board meeting was the first street fair I did, and I met a really great person who became my mentor, one of my mentors on the board and a co-chair of mine, and I encourage everyone here to do it. It's really fun and you meet a lot of people, and it's also a great way for us to connect as board members. You know, we don't really have, especially on Zoom, we don't have as much time to get to know each other as people, and it's a great opportunity for us as board members, to get to know each other.
And then when taking an action, how would you balance the views expressed by those who show up at the board meeting with views that you have yourself and other board members may have?
Well, we were all appointed to this board because of our areas of expertise, so it's important not to lose sight of that. That being said, I very much believe in listening to the public, hearing their concerns, and the biggest thing that I think we need to go back to, as was kind of referenced to before, is making sure every public speaker says their address when they're speaking, so that we have an awareness of whether or not they're members of this community district or if they live outside of it, because that's something I think that's been a little bit lost during the Zoom era.
Do you feel comfortable expressing an opinion at a meeting that you believe goes against the views of the majority of the board?
Very much so. I think I was one of the only people who voted against changing our bylaws for this. I think it's very important to stick to your own, to what you truly believe, but also to understand that once the vote is done and the board has made a decision, that decision must be respected, even if you disagree.
And finally, what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think people would want to know before voting, something relevant to your performance and your prospective position, or about your personality in general, or personal experience, or anything else?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning. I've done a lot of behind the scenes work that I've loved to do, whether it's helping out co-chairs of committees, whether it's staying up super late with the secretaries and Will to make sure that our vote counts are accurate. I love that other side of the board, of participating as a board member. It's not just going to meetings and dealing with very important community issues. I love being able to do my part and to use my strengths, whether it's taking crazy notes during all of these meetings or looking at the minutes ahead of time. It's something that I feel like enables me to leave my mark and to know that I'm doing the best I can for this board, and I would love the opportunity to continue to do so.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it. Okay, our next candidate for second vice chair is Sharon Pope Marshall. Can we unmute Sharon?
Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. Hi, Chuck. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think we can hear you. Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, Sharon, why did you decide to run for the office of second vice chair? Can you tell us?
First of all, yes, I can. And I want to thank the election committee for their work. And also, I really want to give a shout out, if you will, to the other candidates. The community board cannot do any better than the slate that you have before you this evening. But that doesn't mean that I want you to vote for somebody else. I want you to vote for me. So the answer to your question is, I have worked very, very hard. When I first was appointed to the community board, I was so engaged with the community board that what I decided to do was to take graduate courses at Hunter. And I took 3 courses, one in urban planning, the other in GIS mapping, and the other is community and economic development. I am, the community board is such a basic example of democracy, and it's not lost on me that we're having this meeting the day after our great nation has really come out in full force and exercised their right to vote. And for me, a part of that is also being civically engaged. And I have appreciated the issues that have come before the board, so much so that I took many more planning courses and subsequently worked at the Department of City Planning while I was on the community board. And so I want to move to this position because I have the expertise, I have the institutional memory, I've embraced new ideas, and I feel that I can support both Valerie as, I feel that I can support the first vice chair as well as the chair with my embracement of new ideas and balancing that with my institutional memory as well.
Thank you. So could you tell us a little bit about your administrative or managerial experience, either on the board or in other organizations?
Sure. So my background is in advocacy work, and my last 2 positions are at the managerial level and both are with nonprofits. I want you to know that I do agree with everyone else. The first, with the other candidates, the first rule with advocacy work is indeed listening. And to sort of segue into one of your other questions as well, and that's what I also do in my professional work, and not only with advocacy, but also with anyone who works for me. So I listen first, and I focus on making sure that I've incorporated other viewpoints in my work. And also, most importantly, I don't make any assumptions. That doesn't mean that I don't have ideas of my own, but I make sure that I don't make the assumption as to the reason why something should happen or should not happen, and that I pay very, very close attention to either an employee or in my professional work doing advocacy work.
Thank you. You put both those questions together, that's fine. What do you see as a major challenge facing the community board at this point?
Well, several people have already alluded to that, and which is two things actually. One is making sure that we get the community board out front to the residents in our district. That's one. And secondly, we have some very, very significant land use issues that are on the horizon. And we'll need really to pay attention to what's coming up, because they're going to be, I think, very impactful to Community Board A. So the two specific issues are ensuring that our community in Community Board A knows about us, and we do that by going out to various organizations, and doing outreach and just talking to people about what we do at the community community organization level, and making sure that we're proactively going out into the community and doing that. I talked about land use issues that are on the horizon for the community board. Like many of us, we were disappointed with the outcome of the New York Blood Center. I really thought that we need very much to collaborate and do so across community district lines. And I created the Eastside Land Use Coalition, reaching out to community boards 11, 8, 6, and now we have 5 actually on the west side. And the idea for the coalition was so that we could talk to each other, have the space where we could support each other and get information, exchange resources, and better understand that what's happening in one community district can happen, it can be the canary in the coal mine for your neighboring community board district. The idea is perhaps at some point to be able to have a unified voice where we might be able to take a stance on a position, and even if it's not within our respective community boards. I think that that's critical, because it's been my experience that having this unity, speaking across community districts, is really critical in addressing some of the land use issues that we're going to be experiencing.
Thank you. I think that covers that question then about cooperation with the community boards too. Do you think the current community board committee structure covers the needs of the community? And would you change it anyway, add, subtract, or do anything else?
No, I wouldn't change it at all. I think that we have the appropriate number of committees for the specific areas, and I would not change it at all.
Thank you. What steps do you think we could take to shorten our meetings or give us more time for discussion of a resolution?
Yeah, you know what? I have a tendency to think that the problem is not really with the public, because I, along with everyone else, believes that the public should be heard, within their 2-minute time frame, and we honestly should allow everyone to speak. Where I think that we might have some leeway is with the board members, actually, and looking at perhaps being a bit more proactive in terms of making sure that after a point is made, that we might ask, okay, we appreciate your point. Do you think that it needs to be elaborated further? Maybe perhaps asking those types of questions, or at the very beginning, once the public session has been heard and we're in executive session, maybe suggesting, for example, I think this topic might take maybe about 20 minutes or 25 minutes. Maybe if we could sort of keep that within that time frame, or 15 minutes. Let's see if we could keep that keep the discussion as well as a possible, crafting of a resolution within that time frame. Basically, perhaps acting as a guide for community board members, and in suggesting perhaps the length of time something should be discussed. Having said that, it should happen organically. I mean, if there are, certainly a lot of people who need to talk about that subject, it's important that community board members be heard as well. But providing some guidance might be helpful.
Thank you. What more do you think we can do to make sure the board comes to the attention of more people in our community district? What are the types of things?
Yeah, so I already alluded to that earlier. Being more proactive in terms of going out to local community meetings, and perhaps having the opportunity to talk about Community Board 8 at those meetings. Almost all of us, certainly, we're very time challenged, and that's because we all belong to, most likely, to other community organizations, and perhaps leaning into that or tapping into that, we might be able to say, hey, at your meeting, really reach out to the board members and say, what other community groups do you belong to? And do you think that you might be able to put us on the agenda, or invite a community board member to the meeting to just talk about, take 5 or 10 minutes to talk about Community Board 8?
Thank you. Have you participated in community outreach efforts that can to elevate the profile of the board, such as street fairs, things like that?
I have, not recently, but I have, yes. And that's one way, certainly, of getting our name out there. The community boards, not the, I'm sorry, I'm very nervous here, so let me just admit that right from the very beginning.
Okay.
Um, so it's I'm so glad that we're participating in the street fairs. And certainly that is one way that the board is able to talk with people about what the community board does and how to get on the community board. I am hoping that perhaps we can also look at other ways of making sure, not just through street fairs, but also participating in other meetings and events as well.
Thank you. So when taking an action, how would you balance the views expressed by those who show up at a particular meeting with the views that you might have or other board members might have?
Well, you know what? Right off the bat, everybody just has strong views, and so I've already said that it's very important to be able to listen to those views. Certainly of people who come to our meetings. It's important to listen to community board member views, but at the end of the day, it's what position the board takes, and it's our responsibility as board members to make sure that we support the position of the board as board members. That doesn't mean, though, that we cannot disagree or have different opinions, because certainly we will. Clearly the board is diverse, and it's diverse for that reason, because each of us brings something valuable and different to the table. But once that vote is taken, it's the board's position.
Thank you. Do you feel comfortable expressing an opinion at a meeting that you believe goes against the majority of the board or would be against the majority's view?
Yes, definitely. And not only do I feel comfortable, I feel prepared for what happens next. So, yes, very much so, and I have.
Thank you. And finally, what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think we'd want to know before casting a vote? Something relevant to your performance on the new position, or about your personality in general, or personal experience? Anything you want.
Yeah, so something personal, I'll tell you. When I was first appointed to the community board, I was so completely afraid to say anything. And so, a few months later, there was a discussion, and you know what? I thought that I would raise my hand and make a recommendation, because I thought that the discussion had reached a roadblock. And the room was quiet. I mean, it was really the first time after I introduced myself initially. And someone stood up and said, "I think you're right. I want you to know that I have never forgotten that." And I felt absolutely phenomenal. that was when I felt a part of the board. Now, listen, I will also tell you that if somebody said, I think you're wrong, I still would have felt a part of the board because someone heard me and agreed or disagreed with me. But in this particular case, someone agreed with me. And I want you to know that I have never, ever, ever lost that feeling. And it's a feeling of knowing that your colleagues will hear you, that your colleagues will either agree with you or disagree with you. And it's because I've never lost that wonderful feeling of being engaged. I felt that I was making a difference. And to this day, that's what drove me back to school. That's what drove me, to city planning. That's what really moved me to start the East Side Land Use Coalition, because I still have that feeling from day one, and over the years I haven't lost that feeling, and that's what I want to be able to continue to share as second vice chair, and also with fellow board members. And as this is the last question, I would really appreciate and ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. I should just mention that the candidates next week will have an opportunity to give a short speech also before the vote. Now we go to our next and last office. They're the secretaries, and we have 3 candidates for secretaries, and there'll be a subset of questions for the secretaries. But Sandrea Coleman is our first candidate, and Sandrea, if we can unmute Sandrea.
Hi, greetings all.
Hi, Sandrea, how are you? First, can you tell us, why did you decide to run for this position, I guess, again, essentially?
Well, I actually feel that being a secretary is very important, and taking the role accurately is important. And I love to serve. And, it was my first, this will be my second time if I get elected, which probably will, but because there's nobody running against us, all 3. But I just wanted to serve and just, get the vote accurate. And I learned along the way. I have a background of administrative work, but every job and every task is always different. And this is basically, taking the role, but just making sure that it's accurate. So I wanted to run again, to serve again in this capacity.
Thank you. Just a couple of other questions. What steps do you think, from your perspective, can be taken to shorten our meetings so we can have more time for discussions on resolutions and things like that?
Well, as a person that I am, an activist, organizer, I believe everybody's voice should be heard. So definitely, however we can crunch different I guess committees, their reports and everything like that. But people need to really be heard. So it is very important that that happens. It's really it's hard for me to say to shorten the meetings, because then you're stifling people's voice. You know what I mean? From each resolution we're going through at the full board meeting. So, but whatever we can do collectively to allow people to be heard, and we do need the public session, which is very important. And everybody that signs up to speak needs to be able to speak. So it's kind of, for me, it's kind of difficult because I see people, even though we're trying to keep the meeting short, I also see that some hands that are raised in the board are not actually called on. You know, I've even experienced it too. So that's kind of hard for me to kind of really give a good answer because I'm on a different spectrum of it. And we signed up for this, you know, so everybody I know wants shorter meetings to a degree, but we also need to have our voices heard because that's why we signed up to be community board members to serve.
Thank you. Do you feel you have what skills necessary to correctly and quickly tabulate votes during our meetings?
Well, yes, we've had some meetings, internal meetings, to see how we can make sure that our vote is accurate and how we can do it efficiently and as swiftly, but with accuracy, I must say. And there's a vote tally sheet that was introduced when we had the last meeting, and I personally opted for it because writing down the names is one thing, but then you have to write it down and you have to do the counting. But when you have the names already on a sheet and you're just checking whichever way their vote, you know, goes. And I found that to run very smoothly. So, and, you know, I just actually got it for the last vote. So it's really good. So thanks for Will when we did have the discussion, because writing by hand, especially if you have a large vote, it's really hard to tally quickly. You know, if you have a few no votes or, you know, it's easy. But if you have a lot of votes, that sheet is very important. And I found it to be it worked well for me personally.
Thank you. So what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think people would want to know before voting? Something, you know, about your personality in general or your personal experience or anything relevant that you think is relevant? Yeah,
so I'm 30 years in this district. I am an activist and an organizer. I'm medically retired from the New York City Police Department. I served over 23 years I retired as a payroll supervisor. I'm the co-founder of the Holmes Isaacs Coalition. I am the co-founder, co-host of the One Night podcast. At that podcast, I serve as the executive producer, the production manager, as well as the show administrator. I also formerly served as director administrator with the Jets of Harlem, now known as the Harlem Jets with the name change. I did that for several years. I've been volunteering for 40 years. I'll say that, 40 years. And I started at 16. So with that said, you can do the math and you know my age. I just had a birthday about a week ago. But with that said, I love to serve. I'm also a consecrated deaconess. I'm an ordained minister. And, you know, this is for me. One of the things with the community board, my former pastor, I was worshiping in the Bronx. He went back to North Carolina. A lot of times he would talk to us in the meetings and say, I have to go to a community board. He served on community board 3. And just to hear him having his voice heard and being a part of the community board, I was like, wow, that was interesting. You know, I was intrigued. And then I attended a few community board meetings. And eventually I decided to put my application in. And I got appointed in 2020 and I was reappointed this year.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Our next candidate for secretary is Felice Arbor. Can we unmute Felice?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Muting myself, I turned my video off as well. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We can see and hear you. Okay, so Felice, why did you decide to run for this position of secretary?
After spending a fair amount of time talking to Rebecca about the issues and challenges of being the recording secretary, and talking to her over the past year or so, I felt it was important to run and to provide not just a voice, but also the role of somebody who is very diligent and very accurate, very hardworking. So that was why I chose to run.
Good, thank you. And from your perspective, what steps do you think we could take to shorten our board meetings to have more time for discussion on resolutions and things like that?
I think that a lot of the community board members are can maybe be a little bit more concise in what they have to say on when the meeting is going long. I think people are very persuasive and have interesting points of view. And I think the role of being on a community board is to try to advocate for specific positions. But I think sometimes some folks can say that in a little longer, and maybe there's a way of for very controversial issues, or when the meeting's going very long, or there's a lot of stuff on the agenda, maybe setting time limits on the board members, and that might help streamline the time that it takes the meetings. So it still allows people to express their position and really try to advocate for certain positions, but maybe gives more of an opportunity for more members of the board to speak up. Thank you. You think that you have the skills to correctly and quickly tabulate the votes during our meetings? Yes. Feel comfortable? I do. I think that's probably the most important role for the recording secretary, and I am diligent and accurate and hardworking, and tend to take fairly copious notes anyhow as I'm sitting in the meetings. So I think I could be an effective recording secretary and an asset to the board. Thank you. Last question. What would you like to tell us about yourself you think we would want to know before voting? You know, something about your personality in general, or personal experience, or something you think is relevant to your performance as secretary? Well, I believe in working cooperatively. I try to work behind the scenes to help out where I can. You know, I think one of the things with moving towards the recommendations for the elections committee, and you know, when I wasn't able to attend one of the meetings, putting together and circulating in advance of the meeting some recommendations on how to move forward based on what consolidation of some of the items that were processes from some of the other community boards and how they handle things. So I believe in working behind the scenes where I can, and trying to be effective, and in trying to work cooperatively with members of the community board. Thank you. Thank you, Felice. Okay, our last candidate for secretary is Addison Lev. If we can unmute Addison.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Amazing.
So why, Addison, why did you decide to run for secretary?
Well, I mean, I think the reason that I chose to run was simple for me. I love the community board. I love the work that we do together. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve with all of you, as I've reiterated with people whenever I have a chance to. And so I was looking for ways that I could be of use. And I think the secretary position would be a role that I could really see myself being helpful in. I have the experience with Excel, with Zoom, with data collection, with leading diverse groups of people. And so I think for me, this was a no-brainer in a way that I could sort of lend my skill sets. And so, I think I can grow into this role. Obviously, I'm one of the newest members, and so I'm still learning the ropes. But I think that means that I'm going to work just as hard to make sure that I'm doing a good job, both as my role as a community board member, but also as secretary. And that's why I ran. I wanted to be helpful, and I want to lend a helping hand when I can. And that's why I wanted to join the community board, and that's why I want to be the secretary as well.
Right. I think you actually addressed that question also about skills. I assume skills you're referring to, or you think you have the skills to correctly and quickly tabulate the votes during our meeting.
Yes. And I would add that I'm a college student. So my biggest role as a college student is to take notes and to take in information really quickly and make sure that it's organized and presented neatly so that it's understandable. And so that's the sort of skills that I practice every day and that I would continue to bring here.
Do you have any thoughts on how we could shorten our board meetings? The question that we've asked a number of people, and so we have more time for our own discussions on resolutions and things.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because on the one hand, we, as many people have said, we don't want to cut down on the time that the public has to speak. And I'm also wary to sort of cut down on the discussions that we have. These are important issues and we should be able to take the time to be thoughtful about them and to deliberate over the issues. I think, can we be more concise every now and then? Are there some times when we have board members who might reiterate a point? Yes. And I think that that's something that we can sort of just encourage to not do as much. I get that we're all sort of passionate about the issues, so sometimes we can't help ourselves. But I think that that's one area that we could work on together sort of as a board. And then I think in terms of sort of technical stuff, I'd like to look at the way at which we tabulate the votes to see if there's things that we can do to speed things up even more. I know that there's been a lot of efforts to make things more speedy this year, but I'm looking at, what ways can we use Excel better? Can we have the Excel documents calculate the votes immediately so that we have a tabulation fairly quickly and then sort of readjust there when we take out the people who've left or something like that. Those are just ideas, sort of technical ideas that we have, or that I have, I should say. And then I would also say that there's some technological issues that get in the way every now and then. I'm muting people. Sometimes, we get turned off. Sometimes we get, our microphones get turned off. And so I'm just thinking, are there ways in which we can help make sure that we can solve for some of those issues? And I think some of this will be fixed when we move back in person, some of the discontinuities in the way that we communicate. And then we're also adding in the whole hybrid model as well. And so I think as someone who's gone through hybrid school before, I'm equipped to sort of anticipate some of the issues that we have going into hybrid meetings, and that, if we can anticipate them in advance and proactively fix some of them, I think that will also help to shorten some of the meetings in the end.
Thank you. So last question, what would you like to tell us about yourself that you think would be relevant before we vote to your taking this position, or about your personality or general or personal experience?
I mean, I would just like to say, I've been in the neighborhood 20 years. I've lived here all my life, so I guess you can do the math as well. And I love the city and I love the neighborhood. And that's why I decided to go to college in the city, because I love everything that the city has to offer. And, as I said at the beginning, this is why I wanted to be a part of the community board and why I want to be the secretary, is because I feel like I can be of help and service to the community. And it's been an honor to do so thus far. And I'd be honored to have the opportunity to engage with the community board and engage with the community in a different way.
Thank you. Thank you, Addison. I think that completes the questions for all of our candidates. I want to thank them all for participating and giving thoughtful answers. And I also want to thank our committee, Michelle Birnbaum and Anthony Cohn, Ed Hartzog, and Barbara Rutter. And we've worked to try to distill the questions that we thought made sense. And I want to thank Will very much for all his help in putting things together and helping our committee function. And I think before I turn it back to Russell, the next thing is we'll have the election at our meeting on the 16th, and the candidates will be allowed to speak. All the candidates, our rules talk will get a chance to speak for 2 minutes, except for the chair, who gets a chance to speak for 3 minutes. And then we vote. So I'd like to turn it over to Russell now that we've completed the elections committee part of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks to everybody on the committee. Thanks to everybody who submitted questions and to all the candidates. I see Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, well, I in turn would like to thank Chuck. He organized this, disseminated it, and did a very good job tonight of asking the questions and making sure that all the candidates were heard. So thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. All right, if we have a motion to adjourn, we can do that. And you can do it with a thumbs up, or Michelle, you're unmuted. So you.
Oh, okay. Motion to adjourn.
Excellent. Lots of seconds. So thank you very, very much, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks.